Well, what a delight to have back in the studio with us today Dr. Joel Klein. He's with Ventana Wellness here in the Medford area, and we are going to take your phone calls, so you're more than welcome to join the conversation, 776-5368, or if you're outside the immediate area, toll free at 1-800-373-5368. And Dr. Klein, we got quite a few things to talk to you about. I know you want to talk about flu prevention.
Well, it's all turns out the same thing. It's the same broken record I preach every time.
we had some fun time this morning before you got here. One was, now I take vitamin C. I'm a believer in it, and I keep taking it. And sometimes, in this time of the year, I increase my dosage, and I've never had the flu shot.
Right.
I don't get the flu, and I do get the sniffles once in a while, but somehow that extra C works for me. Is it a thing up here, or is it working?
Well, they go together, don't they?
I don't know.
I don't know. As a man believeth in his heart.
Yeah.
It's variable, and then when they try to study it, it doesn't come out as well. Linus Pauling, who was the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different disciplines, was a very brilliant man, obviously was the big component of it. I don't think of anything as the panacea. Oh, if I just do this, then I can do everything else I want and it doesn't matter, is kind of my take on the whole thing. Vitamin D may actually even be a little bit more important than vitamin C.
Well, I take D.
Right. So the D issue, they have actually shown when they studied it that actually when Michael Hollick, one of the big vitamin D experts, looked at pregnant women, and the ones who were taking vitamin D had less infections.
Really?
So there may be there. I don't look at anything as a panacea. I think it's helpful.
Okay.
But if you try to study, does this work and do that? People are too individual. You're not going to.
If it works for you, let it be.
That's what I would say.
I'm a B, C, and D taker.
Right, and those are the biggies. The other things that are depleted, doing minerals, unless you're really doing stuff like I do, like doing all these raw vegetables, but that's another story. Zinc and magnesium are the 2 main minerals that are depleted in stress. Zinc, which is why we have these zinc lozenges in the stores. Now people say, well, if you just take it, well, by that time it's usually a little late. The whole point is that zinc deficiency will deplete your mucous membrane immunity and make it easier for bugs to invade. So treating it ahead of time by repleting the zinc is better than all of a sudden trying to tank up on a whole bunch of zinc once you got the cold.
Okay, good. All right, now a couple other questions, then we'll get into what you want to get into. One, we had a little thought this morning. This time of the year, people are taking in a little extra sugar.
Right, right.
Can you offset it with protein?
No, I don't think. Everybody wants to wants to negotiate.
I mean, so if you have a cookie and a steak, you're not offsetting it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, unfortunately not. It depends on what you're talking about, because the sugar has all kinds of different effects. Mm-hmm. My body, if I eat the protein first, my body handles the sugar better. If I do the sugar first, it has to do more with blood sugar and hormone system and adrenals, and I don't do as well with that. So maybe in that respect, but you don't undo the damage of the sugar with the protein.
All right, well, there goes that myth. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, we all want to negotiate our way out of this.
Yeah, I know we do. We do. All right, 776-5368 if you want to join the conversation with Dr. Joel Klein today. All right, the flu season's upon us, and are you a proponent of the shot?
I'm not a proponent. I've seen the data when they talk of doing herd immunity and immunizing everybody. I think people who have significant medical conditions, who really are at danger of having the flu, and I go against a little bit. I don't think we should be giving it to children and everybody under the sun. I just think that's overkill, because I think there are still some things. The problem is it's too individually variable about what overuse of vaccines does to the immune system. You're right, I don't have as much data for that, and seems to be more if we give it to enough people. I still stick to the people who are real, the older guidelines, where if you have lung disease, the older, who are more infirm, these people who the flu could be a life-threatening illness for, are really the ones asthmatics, those types of people.
All right. So what's your sermon for this time of the year?
It's the same sermon.
What you preach?
What I preach is what I preach all the time. It's the things that we do, we just do more of now, is that what causes illness is diet, stress, and environmental toxins, which is a whole nother category. But I think it's flu season as much. Some of these nutritional deficiencies, certainly it's more physical stress on our body this time of year, but how we eat and how we stress are what deplete our immune systems. And yes, so too much sugar decreases the ability of your white blood cells to fight infection. I think the stress issue is the biggest in what has become the whole thing. And my sermon actually is, and this is for people individually, is this really how we want to be commemorating the birth of Christ? And so much of it is tied into family, and even it's almost like a tribal loyalty. And do we really want to, do we really think that doing it's fear and guilt and all of these types of things that people are getting into? Their body is telling, and their heart is telling them one thing, but their brain is telling them another with all the other things. And it's getting into that battle, which is really the spiritual battle. I think that does the most damage to people.
You know, we're seeing this stress thing now play out in so many areas. You're seeing it in diabetes. You're seeing it in blood pressure.
I see it in everything.
In everything.
Yeah, because I can map out mechanisms how stress can affect the function of the gastrointestinal tract, making the gastrointestinal tract actually more leaky to certain proteins, like we're talking about gluten, dairy, these things, that then wind up even causing autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. And inflammation, obviously, we all hear and we all know, is one of the key factors behind accelerated aging. So I think, you know, ultimately, stress in many ways is the root of all of it. Not everybody is it the key thing, but certainly I see most of it. And then you add the diet on top of that.
Right.
I think, you know, we have these people, you know, who can drink and smoke until they're in their 90s, because they're usually happy people who usually don't care what other people think of them. It's very interesting, you know, the more ornery folks sometimes, but it's more, I think if you have the stress part handled, you can get away with more, I think, in the diet and even in exposure to toxins. My Ayurvedic mentor, Dr. Mishra from India, would tell people, if you're unhappy, the most healthy diet will still get turned into toxins.
Wow.
You know, from the ancient wisdom of India. So, and I see that.
All right, so, I mean, sometimes people will listen to you before they listen to their priest or their pastor.
Interesting, okay.
Well, I mean, they will.
Well, good.
They will.
Right.
I mean, you're, and I don't know how we can turn some of this stuff off. I mean, no is a complete sentence. We're seeing people ratched up, and these kids ratched up because they're on all these mobile devices and everything.
Right, right.
Our attention span is now through the floor.
Right.
And we're like this, and if this thing buzzes, we got to stop talking to you and see what this is.
Well, I don't know if I've said it on this show, but Alvin Toffler, who wrote a book around 1970 called Future Shock, predicted that the accelerating rate of the growth of technology would outstrip the human biological organism's ability to adapt, putting it in a state that he called future shock, because you're constantly trying to catch up.
Wow.
And here we are. It really is kind of, you're right, how much can we stem the tide of all of this? Maybe not in the whole, but each individual person has to look at, well, what's important in my life? This is where the diet, the stress, what we really gets just magnified this time of year. And then I think what we've turned it into, not just the commercialization issue, but the overstimulation. When this was a time of year for drawing inward, the natural seasons, the darkening is more of an inward looking time, and we've turned it into, constant external stimulation like everything else in our culture. And I think that is even a physical stress to the system. So each person, you have to kind of look at what's my role in this? How do I want to participate?
No, it's a big puzzle, and all works together from diet to environment. And look, there's nothing that does me good like a good walk alone with everything turned off. I just take off and start walking.
Yes.
I don't take this with me, do nothing.
Well, that's the thing. We need to reconnect with the world around us, because the natural rhythms are the ones that are more, I would say, attuned with God and the natural rhythms. So that's one of the antidotes. Maybe we can't do this, but we need to spend the time reconnecting, because that's what our nervous systems thrive more on. And then you can put up with some of this if you have enough of the other types of energies, I could call them, or activities in your life to do that.
All right, we're heading into a time where people are always going to make some kind of a resolution for the new year, and some people try to do a detox. I want to get into that a little bit. And let me just say to our viewers and listeners, Joel Klein's with us today if you want to talk to him. He's a physician with Ventana Wellness, and he is taking new patients, so you can call the clinic over there and get signed up. But Marilyn, what's your question for Dr. Klein today? Oh, Marilyn, we get her through there?
Are you there?
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. I agree with you on that stress. I think it's really important for people to deal with their stress. But I had a question about zinc, and I was wondering, I had heard that you're not supposed to keep taking it all the time. You're supposed to take breaks once in a while, or is that if you take a low enough
depends. If
dose?
you're taking large doses, yes, some nutritionists will say you need to combine it with copper, but then copper toxicity winds up being a problem for people. Low doses you probably need somewhere around the 15 milligram, 30 milligram. If you're going to take higher doses than that, you probably don't want to do that long term. But the thing is, it's hard to test for. We don't have good tests in regular medicine, but most people are depleting themselves of it so much that it probably isn't a problem taking it. You don't want to take huge doses, but taking a little larger is probably not, because we're typically losing it all the time.
Okay, so 30 milligrams.
15 to 30, I think, is a good number.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. All
Bye.
right, let's go to Frank. Frank, what's your question?
Hello, Perry and Dr. Klein. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I basically had a question about seasonal affective disorder and the effectiveness of a light box, and
Right.
if there's anything else that somebody can do to help that.
Yes, the light boxes for many people are effective. I want to be cautious again that some of what gets labeled as seasonal affective is part of this holiday business that goes on. But the light boxes are helpful. Low dose people can use 5-HTP, and the St. John's wort can help with that with a lot of people. I think getting outside when you can, with the natural light as much as possible, certainly is helpful. And then really taking care of yourself, although some people, even when they do that, get overwhelmed with it. And so in worst case scenario, actually, I know a doctor in the area who says in this area through, especially January, February, and all of that, uses a light box very effectively.
What's your question about blood pressure?
Well, I just wondered, is there anything natural that you can take to lower your blood pressure? I've been taking hawthorn berry and magnesium.
Those are good. It's actually a little bit more of a complicated question that people who look at this, there's two groups of people when you look at blood pressure that you can stratify them based on a regular blood test for this kidney hormone called renin. And there's high renin people and low renin people. And the high renin people will respond to this bonito fish extract that they use in Japan that actually acts as in the same way as one of the blood pressure groups. Sodium restriction will work in 30% of people, but not everybody. CoQ10 has been found in some studies to decrease blood pressure as much as 10 points. So those are some of the natural things. Obviously, a non-inflammatory diet, so decreasing the sugar and processed carbohydrates, here's the broken record again, and of course the regular exercise are the ways to naturally approach blood pressure. But yes, magnesium is usually the biggest nutritional issue when it comes to blood pressure if there's a deficiency.
Okay, and what was the fish extract you said?
Oh, it's a bonito, the bonito fish, B-O-N-I-T-O. People who go to sushi restaurants know that one.
Okay.
That you can find in places, and some supplement companies have it. It's just bonito fish extract, but it's usually not sold by itself. It'll usually be part of a blood pressure complex put out by one or another nutritional company. But if you put that in online, I'm sure you can find it.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, 776-5368 if you want to join the conversation with Dr. Joel Klein. Do you always like to have zinc and magnesium together?
Not necessarily, but they're because they're so commonly deficient, most people need some variety of that.
I was made aware of that because of kidney stones. I had a bout with kidney stones. It was horrible.
Well, it's calcium and magnesium that need to be balanced. But what's interesting is that the calcium-containing kidney stones are actually balanced by taking calcium. It's actually a little bit more complicated unless you're really a hyper-excreter of calcium. So calcium and magnesium should be balanced, usually in a 2-to-1 calcium to magnesium ratio. And they put the zinc in there. Zinc doesn't have to do with calcium and magnesium metabolism, but just since everybody's deficient, they wind up putting them together.
Okay, well, And then on the stone thing, it can either be acidic base or calcium base, right?
Oh, well, you can have uric acid, which has to do with gout. The calcium oxalate are the most common stones.
Yeah.
And you can be a hypercalcium excreter. Me and my woo-woo, I've had 2 calcium oxalate stones, and I can tell you they were both related to anger. And yes, crystallized anger, and I use, that urinary tract irritation problems. That we have a common expression. I don't know if I want to use but you can think of how we vulgar form of saying people are angry.
Yeah.
There's some deeper wisdom in that. But the stones can be, there can be nutritional issues there too.
Well, there you go. All right, hi Janet. What's on your mind today?
Well, excuse me. Let me turn the radio down. I have a brother who has had for the last 2 years a bout with alopecia, and it started with gout, interestingly enough, and then it went into, after a couple of months, it went into where he was losing all of his body hair. He has a reoccurring situation with gout and joint inflammation.
Right.
His joints hurt extremely. So I don't know if it's all interrelated, but he did go on a very, very low-carb diet, low-inflammation diet. He lost a lot of weight.
Good for him.
His hair has not grown back, and I'm just curious as to...
Yeah, that's a tough question. I've had a few patients where the hair loss was an autoimmune issue, because again, usually people with gout have this insulin resistance, and with the blood sugar issues, they may have disturbances in their gut that lead to food allergies. So gluten, dairy, some of these things that can cause the hair loss. I've had in some patients. Sometimes it's especially if it's alopecia totalis, if he's losing it all over his body. That's a tricky one. I have a very aggressive autoimmune diet that's no grains at all, no dairy at all, that somebody like that might use. But that's not I'm sure they're related somehow, because everything's always related in my mind, but sometimes I can't exactly put the dots together.
Okay.
Does it have anything to do with possibly, I know that through the years, I've been on acidophilus, and I know that helps your gut be able to absorb everything that you need.
Well, it's more than that, because the gut disturbances without the good bacteria and these things that happen then create a situation where these gluten molecules and casein from dairy can leak through the gut wall, causing these inflammatory and autoimmune reactions. So that's part of it. Really probably needs to work with a practitioner like a naturopath or an integrative medical doctor who knows more, because he probably needs more aggressive gut rehabilitation and maybe more dietary restriction.
All right, thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Okay, 776-5368 is the number if you want to call us. Boy, that leads to a bunch of other questions. But I want to come back to, people are going to start doing some New Year's resolutions.
Right.
And they're going to think, well, I'm just going to cleanse and start over.
Right. Well, the whole thing about resolutions, that if you really need to look at what's in your heart and what you're going to do. Because they last 2 weeks otherwise, and we force ourselves. First of all, January is probably not a good time to detox. All the natural schools actually do it in the spring, because we still continue to build up over the winter naturally and absorb toxins then. And in the schools from India and China, you don't want to detox people who are depleted. You wind up, it's like the channels aren't fully open. Detox takes energy, and a lot of times you're like sweeping the floor in a dusty room without the windows and doors open. So March is a better time. Do it in the middle of January. You may be more likely to have a detox reaction that'll cause, a more acute a cold or something like that.
Do you have detox suggestions for?
I'm not skilled or trained as some of the naturopaths are. I have some companies, I have some plans, but I mostly adhere to the saying of the toxicology people who say the solution to pollution is dilution. Start putting good stuff in. Yes, you can do lemon water in the morning. I'm not skilled in putting people through aggressive detoxes, because I find a lot of times they do have reactions in that way, but there are other people who do that better than I do.
The other subject, I want to come back to an earlier caller. It seems this gluten problem is growing.
Oh, yes, huge.
Tell us about it.
Well, this is, again, we have all kinds of reasons. I think we've discussed this before, but even researchers at my medical school, number one, 3 years ago in Scientific American published an article where they showed this whole leaky gut mechanism that alternative doctors have been proposing for 40 years as behind these inflammatory diseases, and they showed the whole molecular mechanism as it regards to gluten. They also took 13,000 healthy people and did the blood test for celiac disease. And whereas the previous knowledge had been they thought it occurred in 1 to 3 to 5,000 people, they found it in 1 in 133 healthy people. And I'll tell you, if you take people in doctors' offices with chronic diseases, you can multiply that by many times there. Whether it's because of what we're doing to our guts with diet and antibiotics, these issues, is it the monocultures of wheat that are maybe some people feel that what's in there may be even more prone, because gluten's not a single thing, it's a family of molecules, that maybe these wheat that we're using is even more problematic, is unsure, but it's clearly a huge problem. It doesn't mean that gluten is not unhealthy. So people who are doing gluten-free because they think they're going to be healthier may or may not be. Only if they have a gluten problem is it going to make a difference. And that's where you try it and see, oh my God, my gut feels better, my headaches have gone away, my rashes are disappearing, my joints feel better. Then you have an answer. Half of people with celiac disease don't have any gastrointestinal symptoms whatsoever. Really? So somebody says, well, my stomach feels fine. It says, still do it. Asthma, chronic sinus problems, menstrual problems in women. I found all of these things commonly related to gluten.
So those are the signs.
Any kind of chronic condition that's associated with inflammation can be gluten. Or when people have 100 different symptoms and nobody can find anything wrong, a lot of times it's going to be a food allergy.
You know, it's starting to show up on menus in restaurants now, gluten-free,
gluten-free. Sure, because people are demanding it more. It's, the public is demanding more because people are saying, because it is much more common, 50 times more common than what had been believed before. So obviously the restaurants and the food companies are responding to public demand.
So it's something you live with. You never really are cured from it.
Pretty much, although I think sometimes it can be situational. I've seen people with real bad food allergies develop after they had heavy courses of antibiotics, some major stress, something that happened that actually affected their gut function, and then as they repaired it, and I had a family who found that if they only ate a little bit once in a while and they took digestive enzymes when they didn't have a problem. So I think it can be manageable, doesn't necessarily permanent. People with a real full-blown celiac disease, yes, they have a genetic tendency, and usually you can't reverse those. But a lot of people who are like intolerant, who may not have the full-blown celiac but have all these other problems, sometimes I think it can be reversed to the point where they can eat little bits once in a while.
All right, before we run out of time, I got to get the word exercise in there.
Right.
And it's interesting because I think people start out and overdo it and they get discouraged.
Always,
quick.
yeah. Right, they try to make up for all this lost time. We're not a very patient culture. No. We're still very adolescent.
No, it's instant
in that way. Yeah, and if I can't see it in 2 weeks, no, and they do, and then you wind up crashing, and then you really exercise hard, and next thing you know, that's when you'll get the flu or the infection.
Okay. So, but get on some kind of a routine.
Something, and work your way up. And a lot of times, I tell people, because especially with some people who look at adrenals and all that, say you should do as much in the beginning as feels good, not till you're tired. Now, if you're younger, if you're in your 20s and 30s, you can get away with it. But I think folks of our I put up, say, otherwise you also wind up with the Achilles tendon ruptures and the like. But yes, take it slow but steady there, and you should feel energized by it, not exhausted by it.
You're a delight. Thank you, Dr. Klein. Again, Dr. Klein is a physician with Ventana Wellness. You can call the clinic there and make an appointment. Thanks. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, Perry.
Okay.
Always a pleasure.